A murder that shocked the nation. Hello, everyone. Today, we will delve into a horrifying murder case that shook the entire United States. In 1984, a young woman was brutally murdered inside her own home. However, what made this case even more shocking was that her husband and his best friend accused each other, with each claiming that the other was the real killer. The police knew that one of them was lying, but with no conclusive evidence to convict either man, both were released. It wasn't until 3 years later that a renowned Chinese-American detective, Dr. Li Xiangyu, stepped in and changed the course of the investigation. By reconstructing the crime scene, Dr. Li was able to quickly identify the suspect and successfully solve a case that had seemed completely unsolvable. The crime took place on February 24, 1984, in Louisiana, USA. That night, the city was alive with the celebrations of Carnival, and while people were enjoying the vibrant festival, the New Orleans police received a frantic emergency call. The man on the other end of the line was in a state of absolute panic. Through his broken, frantic speech, officers learned that he had been attacked, and even worse, his wife had been brutally murdered. Given the urgency of a homicide case occurring on a major festival night, the New Orleans police quickly dispatched officers to the scene. However, when they arrived, what they saw sent chills down their spines. A woman lay lifeless on the floor, her body covered in blood and severe wounds. The walls behind her were splattered with blood, and the floor was in complete disarray. After a preliminary examination, police determined that the victim had been killed with a blunt object. The murder weapon was identified as a blood-stained baseball bat, found lying next to the body. Additionally, the victim's home was ransacked. Picture frames, glasses, plates, and even lamps had been shattered. In the kitchen, police discovered a blood-stained knife. And in another room, they found a young boy unconscious and a crying infant, who, fortunately, was unharmed. The man who had called the police was Carrie, the victim's husband. He confirmed that the murdered woman was indeed his wife, Janet. Carrie was still visibly shaken, his eyes filled with disbelief at what had just happened. But after a moment, his shock turned into rage, and he declared to the police that his best friend, Bill, was the one who had murdered Janet. According to Carrie's statement, he had returned home at around 3 p.m. As soon as he stepped inside, Bill suddenly emerged from inside the house, wielding a baseball bat, and attacked him without warning. During the struggle, Carrie's arm was broken, but he managed to fight back and stab Bill with a knife before Bill fled the scene. Listening to Carrie's account, police initially believed that Bill had killed Janet, and that Carrie had gotten into a violent altercation with him afterward. With Carrie's testimony, the bloodied weapons, and clear physical evidence, the case seemed straightforward. Shortly after, police arrested Bill and officially charged him with murder. Just when everyone was expecting a swift verdict, something unexpected happened. Half of the jury members refused to reach a final conclusion, causing the case to come to a deadlock and ultimately becoming a cold case. This raised a critical question. Why did what seemed like a straightforward case make the jury hesitate? What exactly happened during the trial? As it turned out, according to Carrie, the moment he stepped into his house, Bill attacked him with a baseball bat. He claimed that he only used a knife in self-defense and had accidentally injured Bill. However, when the judge turned to Bill's testimony, an entirely different story emerged. Bill claimed that he had attacked Carrie with a baseball bat only in self-defense. According to him, when he arrived at Carrie's house, he found Janet unconscious on the floor. To prevent Carrie from continuing his attack, he had no choice but to use the bat to restrain him. During their struggle, he accidentally broke Carrie's arm, and in retaliation, Carrie stabbed him with a knife before he managed to escape. This created a major contradiction. Both men accused each other, making it unclear who was telling the truth. Despite their conflicting statements, there was one strange yet consistent detail in both of their testimonies. Both Carrie and Bill claimed that their fight started at the entrance, continued into the living room, then into the hallway. But what was even more shocking, they fought continuously for 10 hours. During this prolonged fight, they even took breaks multiple times to drink water and watch TV, before resuming their brawl until Bill was injured and fled the scene. Even more disturbing, Both men insisted that during the entire fight, neither of them paid any attention to Janet, who lay motionless in the living room. It wasn't until the fight ended that Carey finally noticed his wife was no longer breathing. Seeing the head injury caused by the baseball bat, he immediately assumed Bill was the murderer and called the police. From both testimonies, police confirmed that both Carey and Bill were present at the scene when Janet was killed. However, since both men had handled the baseball bat during their struggle, forensic analysis could not determine who had actually used it to attack Janet. Aside from the two suspects, the only other people in the house were Carey and Janet's two children, a 2-year-old and a newborn baby. Clearly, neither of them could provide any useful testimony. Without concrete evidence, police were unable to charge either man, and the case remained a mystery. This cold case dragged on for 3 years. Despite the police's best efforts, they failed to determine the true murderer. With the case at standstill, the New Orleans police decided to call in an expert forensic analyst, Dr. Li Xiangyu, to assist with the investigation. Upon reviewing the case files, Dr. Li immediately noticed that the police had been investigating in the wrong direction from the start. They had focused too much on the testimonies of Carey and Bill, but since both were potential murderers, their statements were unreliable and could not be the key to solving the case. Instead, Dr. Li believed that only hard physical evidence would uncover the truth. But how could they find new evidence after so many years? Dr. Li decided to dig deeper into the social relationships between Carey, Bill, and Janet. Through his investigation, he discovered that all three had been childhood friends. However, despite growing up together, their lives took very different paths as they entered adulthood. Carey had a stable life, with a beautiful wife and a steady job. Meanwhile, Bill was struggling. He had no stable job or income, and his temper was growing increasingly short-fused and unpredictable. Because of their childhood friendship, Carey often helped Bill through tough times. One would expect Bill to be grateful, but the reality was quite the opposite. Not only did Bill betray Carey's kindness, but he also began a secret affair with Carey's wife, Janet. When Carey discovered the affair, he was furious and went to confront Bill. The two got into a heated argument, which eventually led to the collapse of Bill's own family. His wife left him, taking their child with her. Devastated by this sudden loss, Bill completely broke down. He trashed his own house in a fit of rage and, as if driven by some blind impulse, he went to Carey's house. And that was when the tragedy unfolded. Two theories emerged. One, Bill, consumed by anger over losing his family, sought revenge on Carey by murdering Janet. 2. Carey, unable to forgive the betrayal by both his wife and best friend, killed Janet in a fit of rage. Both men had motives. Both men had the opportunity. But in the end, who was the real killer? To uncover the truth, physical evidence from the crime scene had to be examined. Dr. Li Xiangyu, a renowned forensic specialist, arrived at the scene to re-examine everything. He conducted a meticulous inspection, making sure no detail was overlooked. Right away, he noticed something strange. According to the initial police report, Janet had been murdered in the bedroom. However, small bloodstains were found all over the house, in the kitchen, hallway, walls, floors, and even on the furniture. Initially, police dismissed these stains, believing they were Carey and Bill's blood from their fight, and didn't examine them closely. But Dr. Li, approaching the case with a fresh perspective, decided to retest all the bloodstains. The results stunned the police. Among the blood samples, Janet's blood was also found, mixed with that of Carey and Bill. Based on the pattern of the blood spatter, Dr. Li concluded that this was not a premeditated murder. Instead, it appeared to have started as a small argument or struggle that escalated out of control, ultimately leading to a deadly attack. Now, the question remained, between Carey and Bill, who was more likely to turn a verbal fight into a deadly assault? Carey, as Janet's husband, had a stronger personal motive. However, identifying the killer could not rely on assumptions alone. Concrete evidence was necessary. Dr. Li continued his meticulous examination. He turned his attention to the clothes that Carey and Bill wore on the day of the murder. On both outfits, he found extensive blood spatter. This detail had been noted by police before, but once again, they had dismissed it, believing that the blood splatter was a natural result of their fight. Dr. Lee, however, was not convinced. He decided to analyze the blood patterns on their clothing. When the forensic results came back, they were even more shocking. The majority of the blood on both men's clothing belonged to Janet. It wasn't surprising to find Janet's blood on Carrie's clothes, since he had physical contact with her. However, finding Janet's blood on Bill's clothes was unusual. It strongly indicated that Bill was directly involved in the attack. At this point, many believed that the case was finally solved, and Bill was the prime suspect. But then, Dr. Lee dropped an even bigger bombshell. The murder was not committed by just one person. Instead, Carrie had an accomplice. By carefully analyzing the blood patterns on their clothes, Dr. Lee discovered that the spatter was of medium velocity, a pattern typically seen when a person is violently attacked while still alive. If Janet had already been dead, no matter how much she was beaten afterward, her blood would not have created such a splatter pattern. This meant that when Janet was attacked, she was still alive. And since both Carrie and Bill had extensive blood spatter on their clothes, it proved that they were both present when Janet was fatally assaulted. The autopsy report further confirmed that Janet did not die immediately after the attack. Instead, she suffered for a period of time, ultimately dying due to a lack of medical attention. To dig even deeper, Dr. Lee took Carrie's bloodstained shirt for forensic testing. The results confirmed that all the blood on Carrie's shirt belonged to Janet. Carrie claimed that the blood got on him when he hugged his wife. But Dr. Lee was not convinced. After careful microscopic examination, he discovered that the bloodstains on Carrie's shirt were not from simple contact. Instead, the blood had been forcefully sprayed onto his clothes, indicating that Janet had been attacked violently while she was still alive. This proved that Carrie was not just a grieving husband who found his wife's body. He was actively involved in her death. Dr. Lee Seong-yu speculated that the blood spatter might have resulted from Janet being struck with a baseball bat. To verify this hypothesis, he returned to the crime scene to re-examine the blood patterns on the walls, particularly where Janet was attacked. And just as he suspected, he found new crucial evidence. Based on the distribution of the bloodstains, Dr. Lee was able to determine the exact positions of both the killer and Janet at the time of the attack. More importantly, he made a groundbreaking conclusion. The killer was left-handed. Only a left-handed person could have produced bloodstains at that specific angle and force from that position. In reality, Bill was right-handed, but Carrie was left-handed. At last, the truth was becoming clear. Carrie was the murderer. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Carrie completely broke down and confessed to everything. On the day of the murder, Carrie had gone to Bill's house in a fit of rage after discovering the affair between his best friend and his wife, Janet. After causing a scene at Bill's house, he stormed back home, seething with anger. When he stepped inside, he saw Janet doing laundry in the kitchen. All the pain and fury from the betrayal resurfaced, and he immediately began shouting at her. The argument quickly escalated into physical violence. Janet, despite being physically weaker, fought back. However, she was no match for Carrie. In a desperate attempt to escape, Janet grabbed a nearby ashtray and threw it at her husband, hoping to defend herself. This only enraged Carrie further. He grabbed the baseball bat near the door and swung it at Janet. At that exact moment, Bill entered the house. But instead of calming the situation, Bill's presence only made Carrie more furious. Blinded by rage, Carrie turned his full attention to Janet and began beating her relentlessly with the bat. Blood splattered everywhere. Janet suffered severe injuries, and Carrie only stopped when it was too late, when she lay motionless in a pool of blood. By then, his clothes and the floor were soaked in Janet's blood. As the reality of what he had done sank in, Carrie started to panic. Overcome by fear and desperation, he begged Bill to help him cover up the crime and avoid punishment. In a shocking turn of events, perhaps out of guilt or emotional pressure, Bill agreed to help Carrie. For nearly 10 hours, they fabricated an entirely false story, hoping to deceive the investigators. To make the scene look more convincing, Bill hit Carrie with the baseball bat, causing an actual injury. In return, Carrie stabbed Bill with a knife, creating fake evidence of a struggle. They thought their plan was foolproof, but they underestimated Dr. Lee Seong-yu. With his experience and sharp analytical skills, Dr. Lee easily exposed their deception. On March 28, 1990, 6 years after Janet's murder, Carrie was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. Although Bill did not physically commit the murder, he was still convicted of second-degree murder for helping Carrie cover up the crime. As a result, Bill was sentenced to 21 years in prison. However, in reality, Bill only served 10 years before being granted parole. Carrie's sentence was also reduced twice, and he was released after serving 30 years. The main reason both men received reduced sentences was Janet's family's incredible act of forgiveness. Despite their grief and loss, her family chose to show mercy, believing that Carrie and Bill deserved a second chance, hoping they would change and live to make amends. In the end, Janet's case serves as a powerful reminder. Uncontrolled emotions can lead to irreversible consequences. Because of one moment of anger, jealousy, and selfishness, two men destroyed not only the life of an innocent woman, but also their own lives. Had they been patient, rational, and willing to confront their emotions calmly, would this tragedy have happened? Sometimes, one wrong decision is all it takes to change an entire lifetime. So what do you think about this case? The decisions you make in life don't just affect you. They also impact those around you. That's why it's crucial to think carefully before you act. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming infamous crime stories and thrilling cases. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.